Hi, so it's Matthew McAllister here, and I'm at CCAS Guitars in Karlsruhe in Germany. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about playing musically and practicing musically. Seems like a kind of obvious thing to say, because surely whenever we're playing, whenever we're performing, we're thinking about music. Well, it's interesting. There's a lot of emphasis in teaching put on technique and put on practicing over and over and over again and repeating things until they are perfect. And I have no idea what perfect is. I don't think anyone really does. I don't think there is such a thing as perfection. I don't know if that's controversial, but there you go. But what we maybe don't practice enough, and possibly we don't repeat enough times, is how to play musically and how to play different with our musicianship. So be a bit more spontaneous and a bit more flexible. If we practice the fingering for a particular passage or phrase, and if we practice it over and over and over again, our body remembers it and our mind knows to expect it, okay? We're human beings, we can't help it. We're creatures of habit. We like the same cup of coffee, we like the same pair of jeans, we like the same restaurant to eat in. We like to do things that we're familiar with, that we're comfortable with. And it's all because our body and our mind learns to expect certain things. So when we're practicing, especially as musicians, as creative people, as artistic people, it's really important to not always work with this expectation, with this familiarity. It's important to change the things we do and to try and come at things from a different angle, to look at things from a different approach, to keep a little bit of spontaneity and imagination available to us when we make music, when we play music. So when you're a student and when you're very young and you're playing the guitar and you're starting out, there's such an emphasis put on technique, and it's right, there should be, that's a great thing. But don't let that emphasis on technique overpower the emphasis on musicality. Practice musical ideas just as many times and repeat them just as many times as you do technical ideas. I can't stress how important this is. I practice my rallentando, my accelerando, my crescendo, my diminuendo as much as I practice the place where my fingers want to go, the finger exercises. Just so that if I have an idea in a concert or in a recording in a moment that I want to do something, my fingers don't feel, oh no, this is unfamiliar to me, this is scary territory that we're getting into, okay? So, think technically, for sure, always on the instrument, try and be as clean as possible, try and be as tidy, but also think, okay, when I play this musically, what are the things I'm doing? I need to practice them. I need to know what they feel like, okay? So here's a few examples, just as a little bit of fun. Let's take the opening of this Bach. Maybe just to there, just something very simple. Now, in the violin score, this low bass doesn't exist. We actually start on the offbeat with it, da-da-dum, so this. Now, many of us guitarists, we like to play this low E. Some of us like to play it really quite loud, okay? Which gives this huge stress to the first beat of the bar. Well, it might be nice to start just from the offbeat, starting with the highest pitch. Suddenly we have the motion of the feeling of the music starting in the right part of the bar on the offbeat, okay? But also it's nice sometimes to have that nice resonant E. So rather than just deciding, oh, I watched a video and Matthew said maybe don't use the E, maybe use the E, who knows? You try it and you think, okay, sure, the E rings on underneath, adds stability. But maybe there's more direction with the second one. Maybe the rhythm is more clear and the emphasis is more right. So then you have to make a decision, okay, maybe one is more attractive to me as a player, but which one is more attractive to me as a listener, okay, from a slightly more refined approach to the music that you're making. So that's one thing you could think about. Every time you listen to what you're doing, is it in the right emphasis? Is it placed in the right place? The other thing is to take a phrase maybe a little bit like that and try different dynamics, okay? So you could start one. Very forte, very loud, okay? And then you could start one much more timid. Okay, and you could think, okay, the first one is a very bold statement. The second one is bringing us into the piece in a more gentle manner. It's opening the piece up. So I'm starting to repeat these ideas. I'm starting to think, okay, some without the low E at the beginning, but with the forte, with the strong. Some very quiet, maybe then starting to crescendo a little bit more. You know, I'm not sure. Part of me likes the neatness of playing a little quieter without the E, but also part of me likes this robust sound. But maybe the compromise is a compromise. It's somewhere in between. So it sounds like an opening, like a beginning, but doesn't paint too strong an image at the very start, okay? You know, people that are listening to your music as you make it, they are always analysing it and always criticising it and hopefully enjoying it, but they are at least experiencing and interpreting what you're doing very quickly, immediately in fact. So if you don't know what you're doing and if you leave it up to chance, well, how can we expect an audience to really know what you want to do with the music? Now, it's not just the volume or the placement of the accents, it's actually the quality of the sound. So of course, I could want this to sound much stronger. And for that, I'm going to play it a little bit ponticello, so where the string is tighter, okay? Now, if I'm going to do that in a concert, I really need to know what that ponticello will feel like to my fingers. So I need to know that the string will feel tighter, more taut, okay? So the tension is much more. That's how my fingers perceive it when they play in this area of the guitar. So I don't suddenly want to think in the concert, okay, ponticello, because if I've not experienced that enough, if I've not become familiar with it, that's really risky. So I would practice many times. Until I get a uniformity of ponticello. Sometimes when people play ponticello, they go suddenly and then they come away. I want it to be ponticello over the whole phrase, you know, so consistent, so that people listening really understand, aha, this is the music expressed with this tone colour. We also want to explore maybe the opposite of ponticello. We want to explore casto, okay, and a warmer sound for the opening. So maybe... And that's interesting because it poses different challenges. Unlike ponticello, there's a lot of danger up here with tasto that the strings are so close to the fingerboard that you can catch the fingerboard easily when you play. So you don't want to have the spontaneous idea to play suddenly very ponticello in such an important phrase and not have experienced it enough, not be familiar with how that's going to feel. So you should really practice both the ponticello and the tasto as much as you practice, okay, I use finger 4 and finger 3, I move to position 7, and then you move to position 2. The actual intention you have when you play the music is as important as what position the fingers are in and what fingers you use. Now, the piece is full, even in this opening phrase, of what we call conversational interplay. So there's an opening statement, and then there's a response, an immediate response. I've talked a little bit about maybe using ponticello, maybe using forte, maybe using piano, thinking about all the different ideas. Well, why don't we vary them depending on what part of the question and answer, what part of the conversation we're having? So watch. That was beginning ponticello and then answering in more tasto. So even within this small phrase, I'm starting to look for more ideas. Maybe, I'm not sure yet, but for me it started to become more interesting because there's a conversation happening naturally in the music and I'm highlighting it with the tone colour I'm using and even the dynamic I'm using and where I'm playing on the guitar. So it's gone from being just a simple opening to having different approaches with dynamic, different approaches with tone colour. But also we could think about some more articulative quality to the sound. Let's maybe use a little vibrato, and that's of course when we move the left hand to essentially move the pitch up and down to make the sound. We always consider it a little bit more human, like a singer, like the song, the voice, like it's sounding not too perfect, not without the pitch moving at all. When everything is very, let's say, in tune and very clear, it can have maybe the sound of a robot, maybe like a computerized sound. It's just so clear. So we want to... So even though the music is going fast, I'm still trying to generate a quality to the sound that's much more human, that's much more interesting for us to listen to. So I am using vibrato, but very quickly, and it's almost like the whole hand is gently moving to achieve it. As opposed to just dry. So now actually we have a lot of things happening. We have dynamic interest, we have tonal change in colour of the sound when we have a question and answer, conversational interplay. And we're trying to use some vibrato to try and encourage the listener to experience a more kind of human interaction with the guitar, with the notes that we're playing, so they can follow them. Oh, the vibrato, oh, it's interesting. It leads us to listen to the music differently. So if I try and put it all together. And again. I'm starting to vary these ideas, change them around. Maybe I can change them dependent on how I feel. But I'm practicing all of these musical things during the rehearsal, during the practice. I'm not only concerned about where my fingers are going and what the right hand is doing. So this practicing musically approach is very, very important in your playing. And I've just been using that simple Bach opening to let you hear it, but it can be in everything. If you're playing a scale, if you play the scale like this, over and over again, everything, your body and your mind, they're remembering that when you play these notes, that's the approach that you take. Again, not such a musical approach, so perhaps you could practice. So I had a little crescendo to the top and a little rallentando, and then I practiced to the bottom, adding some vibrato. Now, you might want to do it differently, Ponticello. Fine, or smooth. Doesn't matter, but again, every time I'm doing it, I'm thinking musically and I'm provoking myself to change the colour, think about the left hand articulation and try to make it more interesting to listen to. So in everything, in technical exercises, in fragments of pieces that you're working on, don't just think about the technique, think about adding many different musical layers. And eventually one of those musical ideas will rise up to the top and it will become your interpretation, it will become your way of playing the piece. And of course, if you've worked at it with the technique, it's totally related and relaxed and part of the way you approach that music that you're trying to make. And we listen to it in a much more convinced manner. We're much happier to accept what you're doing and less critical of the technique because it's serving a musical end, a musical purpose. So, happy practicing, but happy practicing musically.